I am thrilled to welcome to the show today Jeannette Yoffe. Jeannette, welcome.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for having me. I'm excited to
Yeah.
be here.
I was so thrilled when I came across your Instagram, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole. I went to your website, and there was so much interesting stuff on there that there was like three different options of things I could click on, and I was interested in all of them. So I'm really looking forward to talking about everything. Um, Before we get into everything, can you give me a sense of what you're doing right now? What is your career? What are you currently doing in the world?
Yeah, there's a lot. I have a lot of slices in a pizza pie, I like to say. Balancing, well, first and foremost a psychotherapist working in the field of foster care and adoption. I also started a nonprofit organization called Celia Center that was named after my birth mother because I was adopted and raised in the foster care system. And I found my birth mother and wanted to name a center after her and
Hmm.
create a space for the adoption and foster care community to come together and provide support groups, arts festivals, mental health conferences, which we've been doing for now 12 years here in Los Angeles. That's Celia Center. And then Yoffe Therapy is my private practice. I do supervise and train therapists to be adoption and foster care competent here in Los Angeles County and now really across the country because
Mhm.
now everything's on Zoom. So I've been
That's right.
training people all over now,
That's so
predominantly
great.
parents. Yes. So I'm pretty busy with all of that. And, and then I'm a mother and I've been married 22 years this year was our 22 years.
Congratulations. Good
Thank
for
you so
you.
much.
Yeah. How
So
old are your
yeah,
kids?
I have one 18
Uh-huh.
year old.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Is your practice only like do you only work with the adoption and foster care community?
Predominantly, yes.
Mhm.
I also do reunification work. I'm a
Okay.
court-appointed reunification therapist for the Superior Court of Los Angeles. Um, and so I do that, and that's basically families that have estranged family members, or there's a divorce, and there's a parent who's no longer in a child's life.
Mhm.
And my role is to reunify that child with that estranged parent.
Gotcha, gotcha. And that, I'm assuming, happens over a series of meetings and,
Oh, yeah. There's
over a long period of time. It's not like a one and done kind of a
Oh, no, no,
situation.
no. Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I've worked on cases for 7 years. Um, it
Wow.
it's a process because
Yeah.
especially if a child doesn't know
Mhm.
that about the parent, maybe typically sometimes this happens, someone gets married to someone else and they don't realize that that's not their biological father, and that they
Wow.
have a
Uh-huh.
biological father out there, and then that biological father wants to be a part of the child's life, and
Yes.
that's so you're preparing the child, educating the child
Yes.
about who this person is and uh, how they are your biological father, and
Right.
and really following the child's lead. Always,
Mhm.
always, always following the child.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm. Um, let's talk a little bit about your history because I'm pretty sure that this informed what you decided to do for a living.
Mhm.
So you were adopted, did you say?
Yes,
Out of the foster care system.
yes, in New
Okay.
York State.
In New York City. Did you know your birth parents at all?
So I did live with my birth family for the first 15 months of my life,
Okay.
which is not typical when we think of, children who are adopted. They're usually separated at birth.
Mhm.
But I did stay with my birth family for 15 months, and my mother had mental illness and she
Mhm.
needed to be hospitalized. And it wasn't safe for me to be in her care.
Mhm.
So I entered the foster care system. My
Okay.
birth father also, my parents were married, didn't feel that he could care for a child on his own without their mother, of course. And
Mhm.
so she was also pregnant with my brother, who I didn't learn about till I was 6. that I had a biological brother.
Mhm.
She was when I entered the foster care system, she was 7 months pregnant with him,
Mhm. Mhm.
and, so I entered the foster care system. Then he stayed with her for some time, and then again, um, she started to decline cognitively, and
Mhm.
she had to be hospitalized again, and then my brother entered the foster care system. So he lived in one family in the Bronx, and I was raised in a family on Long Island,
Mm.
and there was a lot of red tape. At the time, my birth mother is native Argentinian,
Mhm.
so she came to United States on a work visa.
Okay.
So she actually was deported back to Argentina because she had 2 children in the foster care system, and, her visa had run out at this
Mhm.
point. So
Mhm.
they were trying Jewish Childcare was the agency I was placed with. They were trying to place us with an aunt and uncle in Argentina,
Mhm.
but that kept falling through. I
Mhm.
recently got and I was literally sitting in foster care for years, 6.5 years,
Mm.
because they were trying to reunify us with family members in Argentina.
Mhm.
But at the time, politically, the country was not in a safe place, and there's a lot of politics and scary things happening in Argentina at the time.
Mhm.
So we ended up staying in the United States, and then I was placed into another family at the age of 7, and then I was adopted at 7.5 in Long Island.
Okay.
So yeah, there's 3 transitions there: the birth
Right.
family, the foster family, then to the foster care to adoptive family.
Yes.
So my heart is in foster care. Really, really,
Mhm.
my heart is in foster care.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. When you were with the first family, the first foster family, were they were just sort of an emergency, quote unquote, placement? Were there other children in the home as well? Was it just you? And
Mm,
did you get a chance to ever see your biological sibling during that time? Were there visits?
yes. So I actually wrote a play. I was an actress, excuse
Mhm.
me, before I became a therapist. So I wrote a play and it's called What's Your Name? Who's Your Daddy? And I wrote a scene in there from the child's point of view of me meeting my biological birth brother for the first time when I was 6 and how shocking it was and confusing at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, so I did not meet or know my brother at all. They were trying to put us together because they
Mhm.
told us we were going to be going on a plane ride to Argentina together. We met each other, and we had passports made, and I never saw him again. So, and I just forgot your question.
Oh, I was just asking if you got to meet him during those 6.5 years
Oh,
that you were in the first
yeah,
foster family and develop a relationship with him at that time.
that was the only time. I was 6. We had passports made.
Mhm,
I was told, "This is your brother." We looked identical,
mhm.
and I never saw him again. And that was another loss,
Yeah.
another confusion. I basically put it like in the back of my mind and
Uh-huh.
forgot that I even had a brother. I was
Right.
6 trying to function
Yeah.
and with all that was being told that now you're going on a long plane ride to Argentina, and then you get these passports made, and by the way, my passport, I actually got that passport, and the look on my face, in my eyes, you can see
Mhm.
scared I was.
Of course.
Scared and confused.
Mhm,
And that's really an impetus of why I became a therapist,
mhm,
because when I started as an adult acting, writing my play,
mhm.
doing the play, I started volunteering with children who were adopted. And I remember looking at some of the kids, and this little kid came running up to me and said, "Are you adopted?" And in that moment, I just felt compelled to really reach this child and help her understand the experience that we're going to be okay. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm an adult. I've grown up, and you're going to grow up too. And yes, being adopted is a special and dynamic, important life transition for you. And
Yeah.
in that moment, I really said, I think I want to work with children
Mhm.
and help them
Mhm.
understand, because that child's point of view, we really need to get on their level to help them understand what is happening in their world,
Yeah.
especially children in foster care. There's so much going on and so many um, spinning plates that they're dealing with, whether they're going to courts and they're having visits with their birth families, and then they don't see them again.
Right.
That causes another traumatic grief for that child,
That's right.
compounding all these other things that are happening.
Mhm.
Um, so, yeah, so working with
Yeah.
children has been near and dear to
Amazing. What a
yes.
gift to those children that you have personal experience that you can be an example to them of someone who has worked through this and gotten, to the other side, I guess. I don't know what the
Yeah,
term is, but yeah, you've worked through it.
yeah,
And
and being authentic and real, that, yeah, being adopted has challenges. There's
yeah.
no question. Mental
Yep.
health challenges. And really speaking to that, because I
Mhm.
had so many. I had
Mhm.
anxiety disorder,
Mhm.
depressive disorder. I had then untreated anxiety disorder became panic disorder.
Mhm.
So there was so much that I was compounding and trying to get through, that for me, also becoming a therapist, I really understood the mental health issues so much deeper. And I
Right.
even helped myself
Sure. Of
understand
course.
myself better and know how to treat these different pieces of mental health. What I like to say is, we don't have issues, we have vulnerabilities. We have
Hmm.
vulnerabilities
Mhm.
because of what happened to us.
Yeah.
And it's not what's wrong with us.
Yeah.
Uh, it's not that we won't behave. We can't behave like other kids because of what happened to us.
Right.
We
Right.
have vulnerabilities when it comes to attachments, building trust,
Yeah.
experiencing loss, grieving.
Yeah.
It brings up all of these emotions that really, and it is a lifelong process. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm still dealing with pieces of my story as an adult now.
Of
Still.
course. Of course.
So,
Did you keep in touch with that first foster family, A? And second, was the second foster family that you went to the family that adopted you, and are you still in relationship with them?
yes, so I actually still do see my foster family.
Mhm. The
And
first one.
the first one,
Wow.
yes. I
Okay.
lived with them for 6.5 years.
Mhm.
And I've told them, you grew me up. You are family to me.
Mhm.
And for me, it was, I loved them. I formed an attachment to them. I was grief stricken when I left them. I
Mhm.
cried and cried and cried. My mother told me for days.
Mhm.
And I would beg to see them. And
Mhm.
it was possible because they were only a town over.
Mhm.
So I continued to have visits with them probably through middle school, and then it ended at that point. But
Okay.
I always came back and I would reach out to them and say, "Hey, can I see you again?" Because they mattered so much to me. And I also needed to know, do I still matter to you? Because I
Mhm.
lived with you for many years.
Yeah.
And so to be received back helped me with my grief and loss, and helped me see that I am loved. I was loved, I am loved, and I
Mhm.
continue to be loved. And so something that I'm doing in my practice now is called open foster care.
Mhm.
Just like open adoption, where we're having reunion with birth family members,
Mhm.
I help children who formed attachments to prior foster families.
Mm.
They can go back, and the therapist and the parents all work together to assure and prepare the foster parents to be sure that they want to see the child again.
Mhm.
The child may need an apology,
Mhm.
if whatever the child needs to hear from them.
Right.
I coach foster parents, and then the child has a reunion with that foster family, and that's healing.
Mhm.
It heals their grief and loss.
Mhm.
Because I've had kids enter an adoptive family, and they're still grieving the loss of the foster family,
Yes.
which is going to impede their ability to attach to the new family.
Yes.
And so it's really beautiful when we can do this for a child. And then in essence, they don't have all this grief and loss that they have to
Right.
keep suppressing and
Right.
repressing. And it becomes all these other mental health challenges for that child.
Right.
So,
Right.
and so, in a way, my own experience has informed the work that I do, for
Of
sure,
course.
for
Of
sure. Because
course.
I
Because you
wish, yeah, that someone had done that for me. I did
right.
it for myself.
Right. Right. And I'm sure there was a part of you, I mean, I'm sure you had to work out why didn't that foster family adopt me? Like,
Oh,
why didn't they just keep me?
oh
I mean,
yes.
I'm
I
sure
had a
that was
lot
a
of rejection sensitivity. I
mhm,
was I felt I had terrible self-esteem.
mhm,
It impacted
mhm,
my self-esteem. I
mhm,
felt unwanted, unlovable, deficient, something was wrong with me. I had pervasive shame. I thought I
mhm.
was the problem. And that's what happens for these kids. They believe it's their fault because kids are egocentric.
Yeah.
And and that will stick with them for
Right.
years. They don't move
Right.
through it. And it does impede the development of guilt, which
Mhm,
causes other challenges for parents because it becomes this narcissistic wound, and the child
uh-huh.
can't see past themselves.
Right.
And I have interventions for that. The shame
Uh-huh.
witch, I call it the
Uh-huh.
shame witch, um, helping kids separate themselves from the problem, whatever someone's pointing out is wrong, because kids often, when they have compromised self-esteem, they
Mhm.
believe they're all wrong when you point out
Yes.
something wrong, and they
Right.
take it very personally, and it's so hard for kids to live through this. So the shame which just helps them separate. The bread on the bottom is your good best friend voice.
Mhm.
The pickle, the lettuce, the tomato, the turkey in the sandwich is put all the emphasis on that. That's the problem. That's what you're figuring out. And then the bread on top is your good best friend voice. Now, not only do I teach kids to do this for themselves,
Mhm.
but I teach parents.
Mhm.
Talk to
Mhm.
your child like this. First, point out they're valid as a person, they're good enough. Value them, point out their strengths, and then put emphasis on that's the problem that we're going to figure out together. A lot of these kids,
Yes.
we and us. So going back to your other question,
Mhm.
is because we I could go on and on and on.
Right. I
I
know
have
that's what I mean. There's so much to talk about. There's like I'm dying to ask you like 8,000 different things at one time.
I love talking about the interventions, and I'd love to share a few more if
Sure.
it's helpful for
Y
parents.
yeah.
I s- so I was adopted at the age of 7.5,
Mhm.
two-parent household, and we also took in three other children, who two of them were adopted. I have
Okay.
two younger siblings who were adopted, and none of us are biological. And then
Mhm.
we fostered another young girl
Mhm.
who was actually reunified. I was
Mhm.
12 with her birth mother, and her birth mother had mental illness as well. But she became stable on medication. And I
Mhm.
remember going to the visit and seeing her with her birth mother,
Mhm.
and then thinking, where's my birth?
Mhm.
Which
Mhm.
then impacted my self esteem at 12, which my self esteem was developing, but
Yeah.
it crushed me because I thought, oh, I'm not wanted. I'm not lovable.
Mhm.
My birth mother's not even coming back for me. And that's when I started displaying suicidal ideation. I mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's just the mental health piece would not go
Yeah.
away. And that's when I entered therapy at the age of 13. And so
Mhm.
my parents really understood that I needed therapy. I needed to follow my skill sets, like what I like doing.
Mhm.
I love dancing. I love gymnastics, even though they didn't see it for me. They
Right.
just really supported me building my self esteem.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I mean, my
Yeah.
parents will always be my parents.
Right. Right.
They became my third set of parents, I will say, because I
Right.
was parented for the first 15 months.
Right.
I was parented by my foster family.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I'm still in touch.
Mhm.
My adoptive mother did pass away in 2018,
I'm sorry.
unfortunately.
Mhm.
Thank you. And she was heavily involved in inspiring me actually to become a therapist because she went back
Mm.
to school to become a social worker in her
Mhm.
50s. And she told me she felt terrible that she couldn't help my sister, Sarah, who was
Mhm.
adopted, who had tremendous attachment issues.
Mhm.
She had also abuse in her history before she came to us at the age of 5. And I remember just witnessing her mental health challenges as a teenager, going, "Can somebody help her?"
Yeah.
And I didn't understand. But once I learned her story, and my mom, basically, she just felt so helpless that she took it in her own hands and said, "I'm going to go in the field. I'm going to figure this out."
Wow.
And
Mhm.
she became an attachment focused family therapist, which inspired me to become an attachment focused family therapist. So my adoptive mom was tremendous, really
Oh, wow.
amazing
That's amazing.
woman
Yeah.
and very inspiring.
Mhm. Mhm. Did you and you've stayed in touch or close with your siblings, your adoptive siblings, or not so much?
Yes, my siblings have severe mental health issues,
Mhm.
and it's an interesting topic because how did I make it through? We talk
Mhm.
about this, why are some children resilient
Right.
and some kids just have more vulnerabilities, more struggles.
Yeah.
um, and it's due to the parenting. It's due to the abuse that someone may have endured.
Mhm.
And my brother, he was born drug exposed.
Mhm.
His mother was a heroin addict, and so he has that vulnerability.
Mhm.
He also did drugs, and that impacted his brain, and he now has schizophrenia.
Mhm.
So, they say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Now, did my parents, of course, tell us not to do drugs? Yes, but he had a vulnerability,
Yeah.
and I tell kids a lot when they have this history. You actually have to work harder at not crossing that line because you have a vulnerability um, to, you know,
Yeah.
genetically, you
Sure.
have um, that possibility of becoming an addict yourself.
Mhm.
So you have to work harder. My sister, she was uh, sexually abused, and that caused a lot of attachment challenges in our home. She was very
Mhm.
angry,
Mhm.
rightfully so.
Mhm.
She was violated and she was a little girl.
Mhm.
Uh, and that anger just caused a lot of conflict in our family.
Mhm.
And really, she became disorganized in her attachment.
Mhm.
She couldn't trust anybody, basically. And she went into residential treatment center. And, it just came to a point when they're 18, she said, "I'm out of here." And
Mhm.
she hasn't and received the proper mental health
Mhm.
that she needs. She has been diagnosed with bipolar.
Mhm.
She needs to be on medication that needs to be treated with medication. And, when they're adults, it's very hard um, if, to tell them what to do. They're
Sure.
adults,
Yep.
they have their autonomy.
Yep.
And my brother, he needs medication too,
Yeah.
but he refuses to take it. So it's challenging. It's
Mhm.
challenging. And
Mhm.
I mean, I was raised in the 70s. They were born in the 80s. In the 80s, we didn't have all the information we have today
Mhm.
and the treatment modalities
Mhm.
like we had today. I mean, my
Yeah.
sister and my mother needed attachment family therapy, and she
Sure.
didn't get it. The
Uh-huh.
therapist took my sister right in the room and she talked just with the therapist. That's
Right.
not what she needed. She needed my mom in there
Uh-huh.
with her, building that trust,
Uh-huh.
repairing the attachment trauma
Mhm.
so that she feels safe in any relationship, and safe enough to share her vulnerabilities. So uh,
Yeah.
it's been challenging. I
I'm
my
glad you bring up
Yeah.
the 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 different modalities, and I want to talk more about that. I can speak personally in my family. So I have two adopted children. One is 3, one is 8. They both came to us when they were just, my daughter was 3.5 weeks old, and Dominic, my son, was 4 days old. And the dynamic thing is something that we're working through because for my 8-year old, she has a lot of jealousy towards our son. And it's just occurring to me, not just in this conversation, but just recently, because we've put her in therapy, but it's therapy, just her and a therapist. And I have no idea really what's going on. It's play therapy, and
Yeah.
there's a confidentiality component. So I don't really know what's happening, but it doesn't really seem to me like anything. I don't know. It doesn't seem like things are progressing in a way that I would like to. There's a lot of physical she gets physical with him. She also is neurodivergent. She's on the spectrum. She's autism and ADHD. And so he annoys her. He's a toddler, so there's that.
Hmm.
It's just tough in general. Um but I'm beginning to think that maybe what we need is a family therapist so that we can all be together and work out the family dynamics because things were great. Like in her mind, it seems like things were awesome when it was just the three of us. And then this interloper, and she actually has used that word, she's got a great vocabulary.
Wow.
He's an interloper, came in and and sort of destroyed that triangle, that happy triangle that we had in her opinion. And it's distressing to us, and it's not all the time. Sometimes she can get along with him, but more often than not, it's not good. It can get physical. There's a lot of screaming, and now he's starting to imitate and reflect back her behavior to her, and he's starting to hit, and it's just not good. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm wondering about, in your opinion, and not that I'm going to go into a therapy session right now with you, but just would we benefit from family therapy instead of just this one-on-one kind of a situation?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, because uh, when you're doing the family therapy, adoptees, we need to build a lot of trust to be able to share our internal world, what's going on
Mm-hmm.
internally. And I love the phrase, "What's shareable becomes more bearable." And when kids are acting out in aggression, they're binding so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's she's binding so much, so I can already feel there's so much going on inside
Mm-hmm.
of her
Mm-hmm.
that she needs to share, and as her mother, to hold and contain that and have empathy, right, for her pain, because my sense is it's triggering. Now I have to share mommy.
Yeah.
Could I potentially lose mommy, which is triggering her grief and loss? I've already lost one family, one
Mm-hmm.
mommy. Am I going to lose you too now? I need reassurance you're not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you, adoptees do not feel secure.
Mm-hmm.
There could be at any moment someone could pull the rug out
Mm-hmm.
and I could go elsewhere. There is a part of adoptees that believe,
Yeah.
and it could be parent gets angry and they
Mm-hmm.
believe, oh, they don't want me anymore. They don't love
Yeah.
me. They
Yeah.
perceive anger as
Yeah.
a rejection. And
Mm-hmm.
these are even kids adopted at birth.
Right.
So there's the vulnerability of a potential grief and loss
Mm-hmm.
uh, is something that she could share with you in family therapy. Now, the other piece
Mm-hmm.
is finding a therapist, family therapist, who's adoption competent.
Right.
And I can tell you, because I've
Uh-huh.
been training them here,
Uh-huh.
people still don't even ask on intake paperwork, was your
Mm.
child adopted?
Wow.
It's still not seen as an issue, as a
Right.
It's not, it's, "Oh, babies don't remember."
Right.
Their bodies remember, and it
Yeah.
is considered trauma for that baby to separate from their birth mother right at birth.
Yeah.
And in best practice today, they talk about, excuse me, that allowing, and it can be hard for birth mothers, allowing the birth mother to hold the baby after they're born.
Mhm.
So they both release the hormone oxytocin,
Mhm.
which is crucial for bonding.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I don't want to go on to too much research here, but there are research articles that talk about the root cause of ADHD
Mm.
is because of early traumatic stress that wasn't regulated for the child with their
Mhm.
attachment figure. And
Mm.
in the world of adoption, there's been talk about this, that at birth, when we remove a baby,
Mhm.
they have all this cortisol flooding in their system.
Mhm.
If they can just have that be held by the birth mother, they'll release the cortisol, and they're not going into the hands of their new caregivers all stressed out, and
Mm.
then it
Mhm.
stresses the caregiver out.
Mhm. Mhm.
Excuse me. So there's really, it's incredible, the research about
Yeah.
attachment and what gets stored in the body, and it gets stored in the body, and it
Yeah.
needs to come out, and kids don't have the words for it.
Right.
um, it's pre-verbal, but
Mhm.
they feel it. See,
Mhm.
and with your daughter, she's just feeling, I potentially could lose you,
Mhm.
and that's
Mhm.
devastating for her.
Right.
um,
Right. She
so
always
yeah,
she always says, like, "You love him more," like, always she's saying, like, "You love him more," and we're like,
there
"We
you
don't love
go.
him more." Like, we don't. We love you both. Like, just because I love him, it doesn't mean that doesn't take away that I love you. We create more love. And it's just she doesn't she's not getting that on a gut level.
Yeah,
She
and
hears
I'm
what I'm saying, but she's not getting it.
yes, and I'm gonna say this too.
Yeah.
Adoptees need a lot of validation,
Mhm.
and I'll always tell parents, because you're gonna get, eventually you're gonna get, "You're not my real mother."
Right.
And when we go to, here's what happens for the adoptee, when we go to, "I am your real," when we go to fixing
Mhm.
what they need in that moment is, "I
Mhm.
hear you.
Mhm.
You you're saying, you're right. I'm not your," and I'll have parents use adoption competent language.
Uh-huh.
"Oh, I'm not your biological mother.
Yeah.
I'm the mother who adopted you. You're
Yeah.
right." You see how we're going into the feeling. So when she says, "You don't love me," and this is attachment parenting that I
Mhm.
teach,
Mhm.
it's, "I hear you. You believe that I don't love you. That must be so hard
Mhm.
to think that I don't love you. I'm so
Right.
sorry you feel that way." Like, she's in pain about this.
Yeah. Instead of saying, "That's not true." Like,
Right,
yeah,
right, and
yeah.
it gives me goosebumps because I had another kid, the parent kept saying, "He's always yelling how stupid he is," and I always tell him, "You're not stupid," and I say, "I need you to do this.
Mhm.
Take a step back. The next
Mhm.
time he says he's stupid, I need you to validate that with him. He
Yeah.
believes he's stupid. I see that you believe you're stupid. I'm so sorry you feel that way about yourself."
Mhm.
And just sitting with that feeling,
Mhm.
because the child is going to scream it louder and louder and louder until somebody gives this feeling
Mhm.
attention.
Yeah.
That's attunement, and that's called intersubjective experience. It's the
Mhm.
parent experiencing the feeling with the child and going,
Mhm.
and then co-regulating that feeling. And
Mhm.
we do it all the time, but as parents, because I'm parents too,
Mhm.
we wanna fix, because we wanna help our children. We don't want them
Right.
to feel any right, we want them to feel good.
Right.
Um, but when we feel it, it's actually information, and
Mhm.
to go, "Wow, I'm feeling sad about this. I'm gonna feel sad about this with her."
Yeah.
And I really learned this when, So my son has hearing loss,
Mhm.
and which was devastating for me because I thought I caused it. It
Mm.
was my biological child, and this is just a
Mhm.
quick story.
Mhm.
He kept telling me, "Mommy, I couldn't understand him because he didn't develop language like other kids, and it was
Mhm.
really difficult for us."
Mhm.
Um, and he would cry because I'd say, "Tell me that again, so I could can hear what you're saying, can get what you're saying."
Yeah.
And he just started crying, and I said, "I'm so sad too that I don't know what you're saying right now. I'm sad about that too." And in that moment, I went, attachment parenting. I get it.
Mm.
I get it. And it takes us to get out of our own way.
Mhm.
Feeling with your child is so powerful and
Mhm.
empowering. And
Mhm.
the term is feeling felt.
Mm.
And that's how we help anyone through
Yeah.
their experience. But if we're getting, you know, activated
Mhm.
by our child's pain, then that's about us, right?
Right.
Why can't I why can't I be with this grief and loss? And I teach parents to be therapeutic parents. You have to be good at grief
Mhm.
because adoption is formed through grief and
That's right.
loss.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is a big part of our experience that we need people to feel, and it's not sympathy, it's empathy. And when I cried, and my mom wasn't, she did the best that she could. She
Mhm.
sometimes she would tell me stop feeling sorry for myself.
Mhm.
And I kept stuffing it. That's what caused my
Mm.
anxiety disorder.
Mhm.
What I
Mhm.
really needed her to say to me
Mhm.
is, "I'm so sorry, honey. You feel so sorry for yourself. You have a lot to feel sorry for."
Yeah.
I
Yes.
was grieving. I was in bereavement. I
Yeah.
just left the whole life, and now I'm, huh? I mean,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so, and I did talk to my mom as an adult, and I said, "Mom, I really need you to say this." And we had a corrective. It's called a corrective emotional experience. She said, "I'm so
Wow.
sorry I couldn't say that to you. I didn't know what I know
Yeah.
now."
Amazing.
And we hugged and we cried.
Yes.
And that didn't happen till I was an adult, but
Yep.
we both understood it because now we're in the field
Yeah.
understanding all these vulnerabilities. And I don't know if you've read the book, The Seven Core Issues
Mm-mm.
in Adoption.
Okay. No, but I should.
It's a
I'm gonna
wonderful
put that
book.
in my notes. Yeah.
Yes, and
Okay.
there's seven core issues, and there's grief, loss, um, anger, guilt, shame, intimacy, control, um, that are just vulnerabilities for actually
Yes.
all members of the constellation. Which
Uh-huh.
even
Uh-huh.
adoptive parents may
Yeah.
have their own loss due to not being able to have their own biological child. That's a loss in and of itself.
Right.
Oh, and intimacy, I think I said. Intimacy
Okay.
is one of the core
Okay.
issues. Guilt and
Yeah.
shame is the same.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and birth parents, of course, have their own grief and loss,
Yep.
and
I
uh,
will link to that book in the show notes and certainly be looking at it myself. Here's another one that I I see that I blew, a moment that I blew that I will have to go back and try to figure out how to handle this one. She said to me in passing, and it's really strange the way she does this. She'll drop these things in passing out of nowhere. It's not like we're talking about it or whatever, but then she doesn't want to talk about it after that. So she said to me something about we were going to drop off clothes to donate clothes several weeks ago. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to park here and I'm going to run outside and I'm just going to dump the clothes in the thing. And then she said something about, I don't know even how it came up, but she said something about, yeah, my birth mom didn't want me. And she just dropped this bomb and I'm like in a parking spot that I'm not really supposed to be in and I'm like and, of course what did I say? I said Oh, Izzy, it's not that she didn't want you. She wasn't able to take care of you. We've talked about this. You know, and so there I am again, like kind of denying her experience, her emotional experience, because I want her to know that she was wanted,
That's
but
right.
that's not really helping.
Mm-mm.
So you tell me what are the words? What should I say instead?
Well, first, yeah, it's always the interpretation of what the child is telling themselves
Mhm.
about their story. So
Mhm.
she's telling herself that her birth mother didn't want her. So, um, I don't know what story you told her. So I'm curious about that.
Mhm.
So in that moment, and because I think I do want to know is my question for
Yeah.
you,
Sure.
is to say, I'm so sorry you believe and feel that your birth mother didn't want you. That must be so hard to
Yeah.
feel and hold,
Yeah.
and just sit with it. I'm so
Mhm.
sorry you feel that way, honey. And don't go to the fixing.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Say,
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
so sorry you feel that your birth mother didn't want you. That must be so painful, right? Just
Yeah.
speak from your heart.
Yep.
And here's the thing, because we believe that we're going to make this bigger, but in reality, you're actually going to lessen and
Yeah.
soften pain.
Uh-huh.
It's not going to be as intense. Now, after that, and this is something that Sharon Roja, actually, who wrote the book Seven Core Issues in Adoption, she says children are always recycling the story.
Uh-huh.
So even though you may have told them 2 years ago, they're still recycling and have new questions as
Uh-huh.
they go from concrete thinking to more abstract thinking between 7 and 10 years old. So they start asking why questions, and if they don't get the answers from you, they're going to create the answers.
Yeah.
Usually not the good ones.
Right.
Like I told myself, my parents died in a fire. I mean, I
Mm.
just made up something because nobody told me anything.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I'm curious
Yeah.
what is the narrative for her?
Mhm.
Why her mother placed her for adoption? What is the story?
So
If
what
you don't
we've told her, and we've always been very like about, we want to be truthful with her and we don't ever want her. She knows that she's adopted. She's known since she was, you know, forever. And what we told her is that her parents were too sick to take care of her and they could not take care of her. Um, so we our dreams were came true because we were looking for you and you came to us and so that's basically what we said. Now, as she gets older, she'll will fill in the gaps of like her parents were both had substance abuse and mental health issues. So that is why, and they were separated. It's not that they gave her up necessarily. It's that they, you know, the state separated them because she was born with, you know, she was born addicted.
Mm.
And so, and then she had to have like a heart surgery at birth. So she had a very traumatic thing and she was left in the NICU for 3.5 weeks and never saw. So they had her, then they released the mom, the birth mom, and then they never came back, basically. And so she
Does
was
she know
there.
that piece?
She doesn't really know that piece
Oh,
yet
okay, okay.
because I don't it's like how many details do you give at a time and
Right.
age appropriate and why would I tell them yeah they gave him a bus pass but they didn't come back. You know, they had problems, they had drug issues, they were not able to do that in
Oh,
for
yeah.
whatever the reason was they weren't able to do that. So
Oh, yes.
uh
Mhm.
so that's
So
that.
yes,
Yeah.
and so her interpretation, and here's what's so interesting. In her body, she
Mhm.
feels like they didn't want her. She feels
Mhm.
left,
Mhm.
unwanted.
Mhm.
So, the more you just have empathy for that feeling and how
Yeah.
painful that must be. And so on my YouTube channel, which I call Genetically Speaking.
Yes, I saw that. That's a very clever name, and I wanted to ask you about that, so I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I do in my spare time. Um, It actually got, I just kept hearing the word genetics, and I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of like my name," and it's kinda what I
Yeah.
do. I'm always talking about genetics and repairing the early loss and reunion and,
Yep.
um, talking about our birth families uh, and so it's Jeanette, Jeannette dash Itically, Ically, speaking about adoption, foster care, and mental health.
Mhm.
And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I did a training for an organization here in San Diego, how to tell your child their adoption or foster care story,
Mhm.
and how to explain difficult circumstances, because that's
Mhm.
the biggest piece for parents. And
Right.
developmentally, at what age, 3 to 6, what should you be focusing on, right? What
Mhm.
are the proper books? How do you talk about it? How do you phrase things? Because often parents just don't have, there's some books, but there's not a lot.
Right.
They don't have, and so I've broken it down. I have a whole playlist of videos by age. You can watch it. It's on my YouTube channel,
Amazing.
and then I break it down by difficult circumstances. And speaking to the circumstance of drugs,
Mhm.
it's kids and any difficult circumstance, they need to understand the circumstance on its own. Like,
Mhm.
why would anyone take drugs or alcohol? And as a parent, and then even relay it to her story, but she doesn't know yet.
Mhm.
And if a baby is born drug exposed, sometimes they have to be hospitalized, right?
Mm. Mhm.
So it when you have an opportunity, and
Mhm.
now that we've had this conversation, you're going to start to have opportunity. You'll see it in a TV show or something,
Right. Yes. Yep.
and then you start having these conversations until she understands why anyone would do drugs or alcohol. And
Mhm.
then when she's an adolescent, because that's when
Mhm.
the big questions come,
Mhm.
you're going to explain the context of that circumstance related to her family. And she's not going to be shocked. She may be confused, or she may feel sad. Kids feel all different things, but she'll
Yep.
have an understanding. And really what it does is it bridges compassion,
Mhm.
because the reason why anyone does drugs or alcohol is because they're numbing pain and they're not receiving the proper mental health support
Mhm.
that they need, or they
That's right.
haven't received the guidance and support
Mhm.
and empathy. And her parents could have been traumatized. We have no idea,
Right.
um, until you do that research and see what you can find, so that
Right.
she gets more context. It's and then she understands, oh, it wasn't about me. It was about their addiction to
Yeah.
drugs, and a parent who's addicted can't parent any baby,
Right.
even on my birthday.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
they have objectivity then, and it's not personal anymore. So how old is she again? How young is she?
She's 8.
Oh, she's
8.
8. Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah. So that's your work to
Yep.
begin, in it for any 8-year-old. How would
Yeah.
you explain drugs or alcohol? And
Right.
just start there.
Yeah.
And babies, um and so one of my other interventions is the question box.
Okay.
So I say every family who's adopted a child has to have a question box, and this
Mm.
question box can be something special. You have the
Mhm.
child decorate it and tell them they can ask any questions about their story or anything really, and put the questions in the question box, and they can choose one question at a time, which gets time stamped. So if you pick the question today, you time stamp it. So if the question is, why was I adopted? I want to know this answer. The parent then has a whole week to
Hmm.
go find that answer. It becomes a stalling tactic, and it
Uh-huh.
gives the parent an opportunity to go do the research.
Wow.
And then if we don't have the answer, and then we come back a
Uh-huh.
week later, um, well, I have an answer to that question. Are you? I always ask kids, "Are you ready for the answer?" Because sometimes
Mhm.
they may not be ready.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. And then you explain it age appropriate. And if
Uh-huh.
you don't have the answer, it goes back in the question box, and it becomes an emotional container for that question, because these kids are walking around with tons of questions.
Yes.
and it interferes with their learning and memory because they're preoccupied.
Mhm.
So it gets a lot of my interventions are about externalizing, getting it outside so we can have objectivity, look
Mhm.
at it, understand it. And then you'll get questions at the darndest times, and it becomes a great tool for parents. That's a great question for the question box.
Yes, I love
Because
that.
parents tend to answer way too much. They feel
Right.
obligated to
Yep.
answer the question. And it's basically how it fumbled and came together because a parent gave this child too much information. I go, "Oh, we have to put a stop on this." I go, "The
Mhm.
next time she asks a question, just write it down."
I love that. Oh,
And I
building
said,
in a pause. Yep.
"Yes, because you can be um just taken off guard, like you're
Yeah.
saying, like she out of the blue,
Yeah.
she said, "My birth mother didn't want me." I mean, it's just, you know,
Mhm.
because she's just because they're not actively talking about it does not mean they're not actively thinking about it. She's obviously actively thinking about
Yes. Yes.
it. Really?
I know. And it's funny because when I came back to and I wanted to talk about it more, like I gave her that quick answer and I was like, I want to talk about this more. This is really important. I really want to talk about it more. I have to go right now or I'm going to get a ticket or whatever. And I came back and then she didn't want to talk about it anymore. She was like, "No, I'm fine. Like I don't want to talk about it." And I was like, "Ugh, okay."
Well,
So,
I would recommend making a question box
I love that.
and asking her. And it's actually in my so another thing that I've done is that out of the YouTube channel, I created an animation called "What is Adoption?" I always felt like, where's the PSA for kids? Like, what is
Mhm.
adoption? And helping
Yes.
them make sense of like what is it, and then helping other kids understand what it feels like
Right.
for an adopted child.
Yep.
And then I created that animation. Then I created what is foster care animation
Mhm.
because I had a child who didn't even realize she was in foster care.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just daunting that
Right.
this happens. So we had to explain to her because she was actually going to be removed and placed with her biological grandparents.
Uh-huh.
And she was all confused about that.
Yeah.
Um, and so with that, I made the two animations into a children's book. And so, what
Amazing.
is adoption? In there, it tells the child,
Mhm.
you get to make a question box, and your
Mhm.
parent you can give your questions to your parent to put in the box, and they will answer them for you. So you can get the answers that you need to make sense of where your identity, where you come from.
Mhm.
And I show samples of questions for kids. So, she's 8. It's a perfect book for her. And then you
I
can
love it.
bridge, well, let's make a question box for you because I can imagine you have a lot of questions.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And
That's great.
especially like did and here's where you go into the feelings again, especially when you said that day, did my mommy want me?
Mhm.
You're questioning that. And I would even write it down because adoptees and an adoptee said this to me the other day. It's like a part of us we feel like we're not seen, we don't exist
Mhm.
because we don't exist in our family of origin. It's just
Mhm.
like the whole just doesn't exist. It's in
Mhm.
the they call it the ghost kingdom. It's there, but it doesn't really exist. We can't really feel it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she just needs to be seen. Like you see her having
Yeah.
this experience of feeling unwanted.
Yeah.
Like just validating, I see that. You said that. Can I write
Mhm.
that down on the card?
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
That you and let's write that question. Did my mommy want me? And then if she asks that question, she says she wants an answer to that question.
Mhm.
You have a week, Rachel,
Right. That's right.
to and I'm happy
I
to
call
continue with you
you
about this.
and
You call me. Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And you know, the pieces that are so important, I believe, especially when there's this ambiguous loss of feeling
Mhm.
unwanted, it's think about did the mother was there anything that the birth mother did Did she hold her? Did she name her? Did she
Mhm.
Was there anything? I don't know.
Mm.
Um, um,
Yeah. Well, she walked into the hospital in Santa Monica and had her in a hospital, which was a really amazing thing that she did. You know, like she came to the hospital because she wanted to make sure that, that you were going to be okay.
Healthy.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the term and there are terms to the wording,
Mhm.
adoption wording. We
Mhm.
often get we still use the words given up, which is not politically correct. It's
Mhm.
the birth mother made a plan for adoption because given up, how does a child interpret that?
Right.
I was given up. I wasn't,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
And it's never about the child. And so it's using the phrase, your birth mother made a plan for adoption at the hospital.
But the
At
weird
the,
thing is,
yeah.
just to be devil's advocate,
Oh,
she actually didn't make a plan.
oh, she didn't. Oh,
The
she was
the
removed.
she was removed, so that's like,
Okay.
not awesome,
Right.
but
So that wouldn't be for your story, for her
right,
story.
right,
Right. Um,
and
yeah, I think, see, I liked what you just relayed.
yeah,
You wanted her to be born like
safe
all
and
babies are
healthy.
born,
Yeah, safe
safe
and
and
healthy.
healthy in a
And thank
hospital.
God she did that because they wouldn't have known that she had a genetic heart defect and she needed open heart surgery 2 days after birth. And because her mother had her in a hospital is the only reason that her life was saved,
Yeah,
really,
thank
you know?
goodness. Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I would need to, like, learn more about
Right.
her,
Of
and I
course.
think just understanding, her self-esteem is compromised.
Yeah.
So whatever you can do to boost her
Mm-hmm.
self-esteem, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just, and I'll tell this too, you're not going to create a narcissist. And I'm saying this, like, by saying,
Uh-huh.
"Wow, you're such a good artist. I love the way you color.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, you're really brave. Do you know that? You're really brave." And the more eye contact you get and the more
Mm-hmm.
they're able to take it in and touch. When
Mm-hmm.
you touch a child, their whole brain lights up. So
Mm-hmm.
when you wanna convey something meaningful, purposeful, hold their hands, tell
Mm-hmm.
them, get that
Mm-hmm.
eye contact, and she'll download it,
Yep.
literally,
Yep.
into her
Yep.
brain and body.
Yeah.
So because you'll tell her things and it'll go in one ear and go out a chute until the
Right.
thousandth time.
Right.
She goes, "You know what? I actually am a good artist." And
Yeah.
you're, like, exhausted by that point.
Right.
Yes, you are, but
Right.
this is what we need. It's
Yeah.
the needs for
Yep.
adopted children.
Yep. I love that. I love that. It's it's funny because I didn't intend for this necessarily to be all about
Mhm.
my family, but I think it can really help listeners
Oh, yeah.
because this stuff isn't really talked about very much. And just the fact, if anyone's listening, just to know that there are therapists that specialize in foster care and adoption, I don't think that I even really I had never thought about that before. And so that in and of itself is like worth the price of admission. But also I think that working through these things, these are probably common things that other people go through as well. And there is a misconception that if the child was brought home as an infant, it's like, oh, well, then they don't really have that much trauma because they were brought home as an infant. And we know that that's not true. We were educated that that is absolutely not true. And um, it's also so important to me. I'm interviewing more and more adult adoptees on this podcast because I think it's so important to hear the lived experience of people
Mhm,
like yourself to really understand the journey. So I thank you so much. um we're almost at time and there's still things I
mhm.
want to ask you about. I want to
Yeah,
ask
please
you
do.
about
Mhm.
genetic mirroring because when I went to your genetically speaking YouTube, I didn't have too long, but I kind of checked it out and that there was a video on genetic mirroring. Can you tell the listeners what that is and why that's important?
Yeah, so we all receive genetic downloading, and that's the characteristics when we stay in our families of origin. We learn their behaviors. We know where we got our eyebrows from. We know where the laughter or the energy. There's physical characteristics and behavioral characteristics that we learn growing up in our families of origin. Well, when you don't get that genetic mirroring,
Mhm.
it impacts identity and knowing who you are and where you come from and what is your genetic predisposition. And it's basically for children who are adopted and placed from foster care. They're trying to figure out their genetic traits, and
Mhm.
there are physical characteristics. Where did I get my eye color? Where did I get the clef in my chin? I learned when I had reunion with my birth father. I looked
Mhm.
immediately. I said, "Oh, that's where I got the clef in my chin."
Mhm.
It's validating. I know where I come from. I have a springboard. You don't, and so for adoptees, they don't have this springboard, and they're this again. The questions are endless. Where did I get my freckles from?
Mhm.
My curly hair. I was a great dancer, and I didn't know my birth mother was a dancer. I had
Hmm.
no idea. She came
Wow.
to New York City, and I love performing. She came to New York City on a work visa to be a dancer.
Wow.
Had I known that, I probably would have pursued dance more
Mhm.
because I had great dance skills, and I was confused. I really was. I was like, because nobody in my adoptive family was involved in the arts.
Mhm.
And so I was confused by this genetic
Mhm.
trait, and
Mhm.
I didn't know what to do with it.
Mhm.
Um, there are behavioral characteristics too, like I said, laughter, even tongue rolling is a genetic trait.
Mhm.
Um, Intelligence, personality traits, whether you're an introvert, extrovert, this all is genetically downloaded through your genetics.
Mhm.
And so, for adoptees, that's why open adoption and, having search and reunion for your child
Mhm.
so they can get this genetic download.
Mhm.
And most importantly, if they have siblings,
Mhm.
because siblings share 50% of genetic traits,
Mhm.
and they'll get that genetic mirroring, that reflection
Mhm.
back.
Mhm.
And with transcultural adoptive families
Mhm.
and transracial adoptive
Mhm.
families, parents need to be more mindful of the loss of these genetic mirrors that these
Mhm.
children need. If you're adopting a child of color,
Mhm.
they need to be represented and see other kids in their neighborhood that look like them.
That's right. Yep.
And so I even had one father, he started to realize, wow, we live in a white neighborhood and I've
Mhm.
adopted two children of color. He said, I'm now moving and I'm going to be the minority in the neighborhood.
Mm.
So powerful. He did
That's
that
awesome.
for
Yeah,
his
that's
kids.
awesome. I love
Yeah.
that. Yep. We moved our son actually to a school. We were when we first came to New York from LA, we were living in LA. We were in a school, both kids were in a school that was it's a great school and we loved it. But there's like, one person of color on staff or two people of color on staff, but not enough. Like the student body wasn't of color. And now we've moved our son to a place that is, I would say, 95% people of color, staff, administrators, teachers, students, and it's wonderful. And I feel really strongly about that. I feel very strongly. I feel that that's our job is to educate ourselves and to make sure that we are in community with um, African American people. He's African American. Um, it's interesting because my daughter is Filipina and Japanese and also white. And so it doesn't feel as pressing, although I know that's not true. It is pressing. And so I need to get more on that about the Filipino side. And when we were in LA, we were more successful with that. We had a couple other families that were Filipino and a teacher. She had a great beloved. Her preschool teacher was Filipino, and she really cares about that. She talks about her Filipino side and how she's really wants to be in touch with that. And we found out that she's actually Japanese. She's always loved Japanese culture. And then I got in touch with an uncle. So now we're in touch with her Filipino uncle. And it turns out they're Japanese also. I was like, it is just unbelievable. So she loves everything Japanese, all Japanese culture, animation, like all of that stuff. I digress, but anyway, I totally agree about that transracial piece, and also it's been a challenge for our family. Um, she noticed right away the differences between Dominic and us, and felt that she doesn't do it as much anymore, but when she was younger, he came to us when she was 5, and she was be like, he doesn't match, like, and we would see a black family and she'd be like, he belongs with them, like, or, and it's, again, it's that thing of just like, no, that's not true, blah blah blah, but instead of just being like, that's really interesting, Izzy, why do you think that, or like, to just continue the conversation, and that's been challenging also, I'll be honest.
And to piggyback off of that, you're not gonna believe this, but there is a book, it's
Okay.
on Amazon, called Mommy Doesn't Match,
Okay.
and it's a Caucasian parent of
I love it.
color. So you
Great.
see how that's going into the experience right there,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yes, mommy doesn't match.
Right.
Like,
Yep.
just acknowledging, and then kids are like, "Oh, okay, thanks. Can I go outside and play now?" Just,
Right.
"No,
Right.
thank you."
Yep. Yep.
It's we get caught up in the, what's the politically correct way to handle this, and
Right.
because it's what's the word? It's something that feels almost taboo, like we don't talk about that, but it
Right.
needs to be talked about,
Yes.
especially in families where there's differences, and to embrace those differences and
Yep.
go, yeah, we all actually are different,
Yeah. Yep.
and that's okay. I had one family, she had adopted 6 children, and every year she would do cultural day,
Hmm.
and they would each child, I love this, they would each make their cultural dish from their family of
Mm-hmm.
origin, and they would all share their dishes together
I
and
love
have
that.
cultural day. And, like, that's just a simple little, right? They
Yep.
just made it a tradition every year. Family
It's
Culture Day,
beautiful.
embracing our differences
Yep.
and taking pride in who we are. Again, lifting, building that self-esteem, um, building that resilience.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I feel like I could talk to you all day. It's been such a great conversation. Um,
I know I could talk all day too,
I
Rachel.
know. I can see that, and I love that.
And I have lots of videos that I talk a lot, and I have so many more to make. Um,
Yes. Well,
so
what you're doing is incredible. It's needed. If people want to work with you, are you available for? Can people get in touch with you through your website? Are you actively still, doing therapy with people and that kind of thing?
yes, I am, and in
Okay.
the state of California, I am licensed, so I can see
Okay.
anyone in the state of California, and
Gotcha.
I always have associates that I'm training to be adoption competent, and
Mm-hmm.
so I have, 2 therapists on my staff also. When I get full, they take
Mm-hmm.
on clients as well. They are adoption and foster care competent, and I do consultations a lot because sometimes, you don't have to do traditional therapy. Parents just need some advice,
Mm-hmm.
tell me your situation. And then because I really want to empower parents to be therapeutic parents. That's why all
Mm-hmm.
those videos up there are really,
Yeah.
it's for parents. Like,
Yep.
you have a wealth of information now. And, there's a lot of interventions, as I'm like intervention person,
Yep.
because you need the tools. Um, and so, yeah, you can reach out to me at yofftherapy.com,
Okay.
yofftherapy.com.
Yep.
Um, And what else? Oh, yeah.
And
So Cecilia Center has support groups
mm-hmm.
also. Those are free. They're on Zoom. You join our Mighty Network. I can give you the link to that.
Okay,
We're
absolutely.
starting.
I'll link
Yeah.
to all of the stuff in the show notes for people. And also, of course, if you go to your website, you can follow through to any of these things
Mm-hmm.
that she's
Yes.
talking about. Yep. Great.
And then I wanted to say one last thing is that
Yes.
um, there's an organization called PESI, PESI, and
Okay.
they train therapists and social workers across the country. And I just wrote, I will have my first published book because I've been
Mm.
self publishing all my books
Mhm.
on my own. My first published book, which will be the Traumatized Child Toolkit, and there's going to be 160 interventions, and
Wow.
parents can use these interventions coming out next year. Um,
Congratulations. That's
Thank
awesome.
you so much. I
Yeah.
worked all
It's so
summer on
great.
it, and it's just really like I started making interventions because I said I wished I had this as a kid. I
Mhm.
wished I had an anger bag because I was angry. And
Yeah.
then I wish I had my sad bag because I was crying.
Mhm.
Right? So these little pieces just help so much, and it helps you as parents have because you there's like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Well, here you go, and they're all DIY.
Uh-huh.
Here's how you do it. This is what you need. It's broken down in materials. So I don't have a link to that yet, but
Okay.
I'm happy to give you that information and you can share it.
Yes, that
Or
would be
just
great.
you get on my email list
I
at Celia Center,
Okay, Celia Center, and,
right
also,
on
I'm
the
sure they can
homepage. Mhm.
follow you on Instagram. What's your Instagram?
Jeanette Yoffe.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I
Eh
post like trainings I'm doing.
Yeah,
So you're more than happy to attend a training. Usually, anything that I post public is for the public.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that, like, one thing that just really, again, to just bring this idea home is that just because it's not necessarily coming up in the household, it doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be addressed or talked about, is really what I'm getting.
that's right.
Yeah.
I like to say we have puzzle pieces, imaginary, just floating above our heads, and we're just trying to put the pieces together.
Mhm.
And we can't do it all by ourselves.
Mhm.
We need our parents. We really truly do.
Yeah.
We need you to help us make sense of all of these questions.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. And you can stick around with me for a second. We'll say goodbye. I'm going to end it here. And it's just been so wonderful. What a valuable session. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All
Really,
right.
I wish everyone well and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.